Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome to Achieve Job Search and Career Success. We are so excited you are here, whether this is your first FlexJobs webinar event or your second or 50th. We always enjoy sharing this information with you to help ease your job search and any career challenges you might be facing. So if you've been here before, you know we always start and just sort of get things situated and let all of the attendees get used to Big Marker and see where things are, like the chat section, which is a great place for you to say where you are joining from. We love to see that. It's also a really good place to connect with other attendees. Every webinar, we have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So please, if you have questions, feel free to add those questions to the Q&A section of Big Marker. That's where our career expert will be able to find those. And we work really hard to get to as many questions as we can. Sometimes we get to all of them, but not very often. And so please also give a thumbs up or upvote any of the questions that you see that you would also like an answer to, so we can sort of prioritize those. You can feel free to take notes, but you don't really have to because we are recording this presentation and we are going to send you a link to the recording as well as any resources that were used to create the presentation. So you'll have those shortly delivered to the email address you used to register for the webinar. Also, a note about the recording: the webinar portion has been pre-recorded, but as I said, we have a live Q&A at the end. So we're looking forward to being with you today and presenting some of this information. So without waiting any longer, let's see what our topics are for today. Excuse me. Today, we're going to talk about imposter syndrome, as I mentioned, and we're going to talk about what it is, how you can recognize it in yourself, and if you do have it, how you can overcome it. And then, of course, we'll round out with some questions. So what in that world is imposter syndrome? I think it's interesting that if we think about today's job space and people's careers, there are not really as many instances of people staying at one company for the entirety of their careers as there used to be. So people are not only working for different companies throughout their career, but also changing roles within the company, or even changing careers once, twice, three times even. So what this means is that more times than not, you would be you have been a new person, a new hire, the new teacher, the new project manager, the person who is learning the ropes and needing to prove themselves, which was a little bit different when people were staying at the same organization for 20 plus years. So this, situation, I guess, in the landscape today can lead to some of the feelings that sort of envelop what imposter syndrome is. Feelings of doubt, insecurity. Really the concept of imposter syndrome refers to feeling this way, especially when you experience success or impressive accolades, especially if you're the new person, right? So typically people who experience imposter syndrome, have this voice or feel like they might be a fraud or somebody who is an actual imposter, thinking that their accomplishments are not due to their skill level, their skill set, but rather something like luck or any other external circumstances, like in the right place at the right time, that kind of thing, rather than thinking of their own abilities and talents. And if you've experienced, feelings like this, and we'll get into it a little bit more later, but it can be really frustrating and discouraging. So we'll talk throughout this, and I'll say this more than once, but many people, successful and talented individuals, have also struggled with this throughout their lives. And so I think the point of, putting together this presentation is to help people really recognize when imposter syndrome is creeping in, and to help you understand that it's not an accurate reflection of your capabilities. Also, we want to give people a way or ways to manage it, to overcome it, to stop it in its tracks, so that it doesn't overtake the efforts that you are putting in with your job search or your career development, and things that you are trying to do. Because really, reframing is important, and we talk about that in a lot of our webinars. But being able to reframe imposter syndrome will help manage it and really quiet the noise that it brings to the forefront of our mind. Dr. Valerie Young, who is a renowned expert on imposter syndrome and founded the Imposter Syndrome Institute, identified some different types of imposter syndrome. So I kind of wanted to go through these with you and see if you identify or recognize any of these and what you think about it. The first one is the perfectionist. And, a perfectionist is a perfectionist, feeling like they have to be perfect, that mistakes are unallowable and not good. There's this fear of failure, a fear of not being good enough, which really is the quintessential piece of imposter syndrome. Sometimes it comes as an inner dialogue or a voice that keeps pushing a perfectionist to be perfect in every aspect of their lives. And when you don't achieve that perfection, there's feelings like I'm inadequate. I am ashamed that I'm not able to do this, and guilt sort of creeps in. Perfectionists, if you are one, you know this, you may have experienced burnout and exhaustion from the constant striving to never make a mistake. You are putting yourself in a situation where you have given yourself unrealistic standards. And because of that, when you don't meet a goal, as I mentioned in the previous slide, you feel a little bit like a fraud. And that's what happens here. Perfectionists also don't do well accepting compliments. This is me to a big degree, although I do see some other identifiers in some of the other ones. So let's go to the super person. This type of imposter syndrome character feels inadequate, even though they've been very successful. They must feel that they have to do everything, and they do not ask for help. This person feels like an imposter despite the accomplishments and accolades. They believe that they're not as capable, and others perceive them as others perceive them to be. As a super person, you feel really undeserving of the accomplishments that you have. It's sort of like, well, I'm just doing my job. Why am I so special? Right. This can give you low self-esteem, self-doubt, and can really impact how you do your work, and even study if you're taking a certification or enrolled in another class or getting a degree. Similar to the perfectionist, the natural genius doesn't just focus on getting a task perfect, but wants to know every single fact and information. So if a person who is a natural genius is not finding all the stuff that they need, that's very frustrating for them within themselves, because it is important for them in terms of choosing the behavior to know all of the information in order to make the decision. So it could cause some avoidance for presenting at meetings or for answering questions, because they don't feel like they're qualified enough to answer the question if they don't have enough information. The next one, the soloist. Again, this is common in a couple of the types, but a soloist wants to do everything on their own. You cannot rely on others for support, because what happens when you ask for help? You're weak, or you are a fraud. So that is another thread that is sort of weaved through people's different experiences with imposter syndrome. Soloists tend to find it difficult to trust that others are as able to and as competent as they are. And they might even feel threatened if they share a win with somebody else. If there's ever a time when they do accept help, they will double question themselves and wonder if they are really as competent as they thought they were. And finally, the expert. This is characterized by people who have a high level of expertise and skill and feel as though they are frauds and don't deserve the title as expert, even though they've done all the things that they need to do to become an expert. And there is a fear underlying this type of imposter syndrome that is you will be exposed as an imposter, as a fraud, even though you really are an expert. There are feelings of inadequacy. Again, we see low self-esteem and lack of confidence in the expert type of imposter syndrome. Experts often feel anxiety, self-doubt, and difficulty taking credit for any of their accomplishments. So some of these are pretty similar. Some of the feelings that different types of imposter syndrome characteristics have are similar. And so these are things that if you recognize some of these feelings and thoughts that you have when you're going through certain tasks, we'll get to how you can overcome that at the end of the presentation. But right now, we want to recognize it. So we know the different types, but what are some of the signs and symptoms? Well, first and foremost, just like there are different types and different ways that it presents itself, it varies by individual. But I've mentioned self-doubt a handful of times. I've also mentioned there's this voice, could sound like a voice in your head telling you all of the things that you're doing wrong or all of the things that you're afraid of. Even though that there is evidence to the contrary that you are doing a good job. You might feel worried about being embarrassed. I mentioned anxiety. One thing that hasn't been brought up yet is procrastination. Procrastination is another symptom or sign of imposter syndrome because as you are feeling sort of paralyzed in your space, it is hard to start something else because of these fears and feelings that you have. And so other signs or symptoms of imposter syndrome are also you may fly under radar. So if you remember, I mentioned you might not talk or say something at a meeting because you don't have all of the information that you need. You would just choose to fly under the radar. All right. So is this you? This is from the Imposter Syndrome Institute as well. But here are the top 10 ways to know if you suffer from imposter syndrome. You might have a constant fear of being found out, or you fear success more than you fear failure. That's an uncomfortable feeling, right? Each new challenge that you are faced with promises to be the big one. Like, oh my gosh, how can I do this again? This is harder than the last time. You believe that every success that you've had is not real. It's a fluke. You see mistake making and failure as the same thing. And when things go wrong, of course, it is your fault. You define competence as unaided perfection with ease. You have fallen into the expert trap. And also you overwork yourself and over prepare to cover up your supposed ineptness. All right. So these are some different signs or questions, thoughts, and situations you can think about to see, am I here? And you know, imposter syndrome isn't necessarily something you go through 24/7 feeling in a day, but there might be projects that you're working on, or we'll talk in a minute about the job search that you're working on and where you might experience some of these feelings. So there are some triggers that if you know ahead of time that this is when you might start to feel as though you are not in the place that you are supposed to be in because you're not qualified. Those things are things like workplace dynamics, different expectations that you and society have, and your personal experience and your lived experience that you've had. And when we're thinking about this in terms of the job search specifically, you may have feelings as though you aren't qualified enough to be considered for the job, always feeling like you have to prove your worth, and your confidence is low with your skills and abilities, especially if you're not getting responses from the applications that you submit. When we work with job seekers, we know that sometimes this causes things like procrastination in submitting applications. And I think it's important that you remember that everyone experiences imposter syndrome in some capacity. It does not mean that you aren't capable of succeeding in your job search. Absolutely not. You will find a job. It just means that you need to be more mindful of these feelings, take extra steps to ensure that you're putting your best step forward and working to reframe how you are approaching and thinking about the experience that you are going through. What is your mindset around that? And is it a positive growth mindset, which can really be helpful? I promised that we would talk a little bit about some famous people that have experienced imposter syndrome. About 70% of people, and not just high achievers, do experience imposter syndrome in some type of situation over the course of their life. And here are some quotes from some people who may surprise you. So, number one, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. That was Maya Angelou, who is a world-renowned, very well-respected author. Here's the next one. You think, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? And I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I doing this? Meryl Streep, one of the best actors around. And so she talked about imposter syndrome. And finally, I still have a little imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away, that feeling that you shouldn't take me seriously. What do I know? I share that with you because we all have doubts in our abilities about our power and what power is. And that is Michelle Obama. So even people that we know and see every day on TV or in, the media or entertainment or in the political landscape do wrestle with these feelings at times. So let's move past it. What can we do to get there? Getting over imposter syndrome can be done. Here are a few steps and ideas that we wanted to share so you can get started. So the very first thing is reframing. I've mentioned that a few times, but you want to start thinking like a non-imposter. You need to reframe your thinking. I thought this, Dr. Valerie Young, who I mentioned earlier, gave a TED Talk on imposter syndrome, and you should listen to it. But she gave this quote on reframing from Daniel Boone, the explorer, who said, I was never lost, but I was bewildered once for 3 days. Okay. So that is a fantastic way to reframe a really tricky situation for him. So reframing is number one. I mentioned the growth mindset piece of this. Your mindset, if you can get it into growth mode, learning mode, moving forward mode, is going to really help quiet and quell some of the concerns that are creeping up in your mind. Being compassionate towards yourself. Think about whenever a challenge arises with one of your friends, with one of your children, with your partner, and they're really struggling. Would you say to them the same thing that you say to yourself in your mind when something doesn't go their way? No, absolutely not. We are encouraging, we are positive, we are there as a support, and we need to do that for ourselves first. So changing our thinking, responding to ourselves the same way we would respond to a friend or a loved one is important. You want to make sure you're celebrating your achievements. You rely on that support system. And if you are looking for a new job and there are some skills that you can learn to enhance your application, your ability to be able to perform the duties of the role, certainly do that. That's also going to help with your growth mindset. When we're talking about this in terms of your job search, let's think about the specifics that you can do. You want to be able to qualify yourself. So when you're filling out the applications, I've got this. So some ways to do this: keep a wins folder. Make sure you know all of your accomplishments, all of the wins, all of the accolades, all of the things you want an employer to know about you. Manage your expectations about how long a job search takes. We know from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, their latest data shows that a job search is taking upwards of 5 months. So you want to set and track your goals. And as always, like we talk about, you want to continue to network as part of your job search as well. I thought this was really interesting, and this is a great way to reframe imposter syndrome, thinking about it in terms of a benefit to you and to what you want to achieve, right? It's kind of crazy to think about it that way. However, in his book, Think Again, Adam Grant, the famous organizational psychologist, talks about imposter syndrome. And I think this reframe, it really sort of stopped me in my tracks. And it's something that I want to incorporate into my management of imposter syndrome. But motivation to work harder than anyone around you. This is a benefit of imposter syndrome, because once you figure out that you're going to do a task and you commit to it, when you doubt your skills and talents to a degree, it's going to, and it can motivate you to give 110% to the project. So that is something that you can use to your advantage. Also, if you are feeling like, oh, I don't think I'm the right person to do this, I shouldn't be the one to do this job, this can be an openness to new ways of doing things, because the more open to suggestions you are from others around you, the more productive you could be doing this and understanding what's in front of you. And finally, somebody that is experiencing imposter syndrome might think that they lack the knowledge, whether that's true or not. So this kind of self-doubt can have its benefits too, because it could cause you to dive into some learning and become a better learner, to broaden your experience and really sort of improve the situation as a whole. So Grant also suggests that a slight shift in your perception could help you perceive your imposter syndrome as an advantage, which would be the sweet spot of confidence, as he says. So instead of thinking you don't have the capabilities to do something, think about it as though you don't have the skills yet and you want to acquire them. Pretty good, huh? All right, so different action steps here. There's a couple that I think will be important to go through this process to sort of manage this and be aware of any situation that imposter syndrome creeps in. Number one, understand what it is. Number two, know what triggers it. And finally, take steps to reframe your thinking. And that's the part that is probably the most difficult, but you can be intentional about it, and it will take some practice, and you will make sure to get there. Okay, before we dive into questions, please know if you have any other ideas or concerns about your job search, go to the FlexJobs.com blog. We have so many different resources there for any piece of your job search that would be really helpful. Also, if you will want to listen to this recording, we will send it to you within a few days. So please check your email as well. And without waiting any longer, let's go ahead and see what questions we have. Hey guys, Tony here. Happy to answer these questions. And I was just reading some of the chats. Sounds like you all, thank you for being so supportive of everybody and sharing some of your experiences in this market while people are looking for a job. It's been a hard several months, I think, for many of us who are in the market. So hopefully this is a timely topic, and hopefully we can get through these questions and everybody can have somewhat of a renewed sense of confidence going forward in their next steps. Here's the first question. Perhaps you've already covered this, but if not, what is your top recommended approach to find confidence in the face of an actual performance shortcoming? For example, a permanent decrease in energy due to a medical condition. Well, I think in my personal opinion, and maybe what I might do to approach this, a specific example of a permanent decrease in energy due to a medical condition is you really have to break. So this has changed what other wins or confidence boosting things might have been for you previously, in the sense of your energy and the things that you were able to do physically. And so you have to, I guess, set a new normal of what constitutes a win in that department, in that energy department. So your energy is not, if it's not possible to go back to where it was before, what are the possibilities now? And within that, sort of capacity, what would a good day look like? What would a great day look like? And what would an okay day look like? And sometimes a great day in this instance might be resting even more than normal. Other times, a great day might be, depending on what you're capable of doing physically with the energy that you have, might be going for, a walk twice around the block or something. So I think that you just have to reestablish new norms of what it looks like to have low energy and high energy in your new scale. Because if the high energy that you had before is not possible anymore, you need to back that um, top energy spectrum down to where your new top is and work from there. And you have to, for any of these things, a medical condition, a job search that's not going as quickly as you want, you have to give yourself grace. There are going to be setbacks, there are going to be wins. And so you really have to, if we're going to, let those setbacks, really penetrate in our mind and stick with us, we also have to allow ourselves to let those small wins, any win, small or big, penetrate our mind as well, because we have to be able to accept it all. We can't just, live on, oh, this is so hard. And then when something happens, like we get an interview or someone responds to an application or we get an offer, even if it's not the offer we end up taking, those are all wins that we also need to embrace as well. Let's see here. Does it affect people who are lonely without friends, family, introvert, as they do not know that it is okay to feel a little worried and not fully in control of every moment? I think that imposter syndrome and any breaks in confidence certainly affect all people, and we all are affected by this in different ways, which is why we sort of talked about the different types of imposter syndrome that might be out there. And actually, um, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and the topic of imposter syndrome came up. And actually, they were recommending or advocating that instead of calling it a syndrome, because we kind of think that that means there's something wrong with us. It was more like imposter situation, or there was another word they used for it. But it doesn't. It's not something that is going to last forever in many cases. Right? So it's something to manage. And I think, yes, it does affect people, but affects us all in different ways. How can I boost my confidence and stop my imposter syndrome from coming back if the job search has extended past 6 months? Yeah, this is, again, as I talked earlier about, giving yourself grace and celebrating any sort of success or win in your job search is going to be critical for this, because when you are in a job search, most people are applying to jobs that they're qualified to do. Like if you are in customer service, you're certainly not applying to be a vet tech or a dentist or something like that, where your skills don't match at all, right? You're finding jobs that fit your skill set and what you would be capable of doing. So to not hear back and to be in the job hunt for months and months without seemingly a light at the end of the tunnel can be pretty tricky. So you have to give yourself that grace. You have to celebrate the wins, and you have to take breaks. One of the things that is really hard to do when we are in a job search, particularly if we are wholly unemployed and need to get a job, as quickly as possible for the financial aspect of it. Finding something to do, even for a short time, that fills your bucket, that can sort of rejuvenate you or your energy, or something that you do that you are really confident in. Like maybe it's maybe you're a good runner, maybe you're a good cook, maybe you are good at doing puzzles, or, playing with your kids, or any of those types of activities that you feel confident doing still need to remain part of your life as you are in the job search, because it is what is going to help you push through. A job search is something that is more like a marathon than a sprint. It does take motivation. It also takes a lot of discipline. Um, because motivation wanes, right? It's very hard to get motivated to apply to your 320th job, your 150th job, right? That's where the discipline comes in. And that's where the reframing of our thoughts can have an impact. I think when I was putting this information together, really diving into some of the things that Adam Grant says about imposter syndrome, kind of resonated with me. It's an opportunity for learning, it's an opportunity for growth, it's an opportunity for you to be uncomfortable. And so I think that that's something that you have to keep in mind, even though it's hard. As an older person returning to the workforce after 6 years, I have confidence in my soft skills, less in hard skills. It's tough to distinguish this from or its role in imposter syndrome. Does this make sense? Yeah, I think so. I think that for people who have been out of the workforce for a while, or who are going through a career change, or are of a certain age, imposter syndrome can kind of be in the back of your mind for all of those things. One of the things that I think for those that are re entering the workforce, you need to call on and dive into: where were you when you were at your best or at the top of your game when you were working? What were sort of the things that were hallmarks of you, your accomplishments, the work that you did? Because you're really going to have to pull from those experiences, even though they were years ago in this case. But that's going to have to help you get to your next role. Also, if you have learned anything new, done any volunteering, kind of enriched your life by spending more time with those that you love, friends and family, this is also something that provides value to not only your search, your activities, your attitude, but also to the company that eventually hires you. So this is sort of an evolved you, with the experiences that you've had over the last 6 years that haven't been paid work, but they certainly have been something. And certainly, all of us collectively since February or March of 2020 have had an experience around something that, a pandemic that we hadn't experienced any other time in our lives. And so, again, these are things that can inform the decisions that we make, the processes that we take, and the direction that we go. All right. You mentioned that it might be hard for people lately looking for jobs. Can you speak more about that? The unemployment rate is still low, but I'm not having a lot of luck. Can you speak to this? Yeah, I think the last statistics from earlier this summer from the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics said on average a job search was taking 19 weeks, which is about 5 months. All right. I feel like that's a pretty long time. When I started working at FlexJobs 5 years ago, the average time a job search took, we would give an average of 3 to 6 months. So we're still within that average, but I do think people in certain industries might be having a job search that lasts a little while longer. The other thing that shifted is there are companies who were remote during the pandemic and who are wanting workers to come back to the office. And there are more employees or workers who would like to keep working in a remote or hybrid capacity than before the pandemic, of course. And so this is making the competition for remote and hybrid jobs much higher because there are so many more applicants for each job. And so this is something that you want to take into account or help you manage your expectations while you are going through a job search, because it can take longer, and it is not because of you and your inability to do the job that you are applying for. It might feel that way when you're not getting the response that you're expecting. It is the nature of where we are in terms of the jobs that are posted, the number of applicants that are there, and the way the system is working. And so a lot of other situations have arisen where people have been interviewing or applying to jobs that have been posted, and then the company doesn't end up filling the position, or they go into somewhat of a hiring freeze during the interview process. So companies are also while they're still posting jobs, there are layoffs, are hiring restrictions or freezes. And I haven't heard a lot about freezes, but restrictions or maybe a justification at organizations if they are going to try to hire somebody. So those things all kind of happening at the same time, can kind of force a job search to take a little while longer. And those things are out of your control as an applicant. It has nothing to do with you. So that's part of why when we are going through a topic like imposter syndrome, trying to separate the emotion or those feelings of not being good enough from the process of being a job seeker and what it requires to get a job is important. It can be really beneficial for our mental health and our motivation and determination to keep going. All right. What are you realistically seeing, Tony? Is it really 5 months or is it more? I really think that this is very dependent on the industry you are in. If you are in tech, but it's also hard within the industry too, right? Because a lot of big tech companies are not hiring or laying off in the tech sector. There might be big tech companies that are hiring in marketing or sales, but not hiring on the tech side, right? So it is, what I've been seeing over the last year and a half, and the last several months, there's still a lot of, we describe it a little bit on our team as like whiplash, like it doesn't necessarily make sense. There are jobs that are posted. There are a lot of jobs that are posted. We see at FlexJobs that there are more remote and hybrid jobs posted than even last year. So that's continuing to grow. But people are saying it's taking them longer to find a job. And I think that's because there are so many more people, even if they're gainfully employed, looking for work that allows them the work-life balance that they're looking for. So I think if I were to enter a job search right now, myself personally, I would expect for it to take at least 5 months. I would expect to do, probably dozens of applications if I was really serious about it. And I would expect to have a response rate of maybe 5%, even less than that sometimes. Let's see. Are there tools you could recommend for people that have imposter syndrome to express more confidence in job search process, especially with interviews? So I think that if one of the most beneficial things that I can see in an interview is practicing role play with someone, right? Obviously, you're going to prepare your answers ahead of time. You're going to speak them out loud to yourself, but really role playing an interview with a trusted friend or family member or coach can be very beneficial. Here's the thing that is hard when you are in a job search for so long and finally get that interview. um you know I personally am very nervous going into an interview, because it's kind of like, I've been doing this so long, I really want to land a job, and I really want to land this job, right? And so you want to understand, and you have to, which is where this question is coming from. I think it's hard to be very confident going in when it's been several months and it's been a while since you interviewed. However, by the time you get to the interview process, the people who want to interview you already think you're a pretty good fit for the role. And the conversation is just going to be confirmation of that. So going into an interview, you have to reframe your thought process to they want to talk to me because of what I've done previously, and they see value in what I can bring to the organization. How can I show them the value as it relates to this role? And that's how you want to formulate your preparation. How can you show the value? What stories, what data, what accomplishments, what ideas can you share that will show that you have what it takes to do that job? Because they already see that. You just need to help them, see it in full focus and very clearly. I know that sounds, some of these questions, we all have to find our own niche and our own comfort level with how we deal with this. So, this, while it is a little bit general, I do really think your thought process when you approach an interview should be, look, they want to hire me already. And here's how I'm going to show them that they should hire me over whoever else they're interviewing. By the time you get to an interview, there's not very many people left. So you're already in the top probably 1% of applicants. And so that's something that you should put as a feather in your cap and celebrate already. This is momentum that you can take with you no matter where it goes after the interview. Will improving presentation skills and EQ help in passing interviewing and squashing imposter syndrome? Personally, I think so. I am always an advocate for people who want to improve their presentation and speaking skills. I happen to like public speaking and giving presentations and interviewing, but that is not a very common thing. And I think the thing is that you get better the more that you do it. But a lot of us don't have the opportunity to do it a lot. And so it's never something, it's not like riding a bike, right? Or it's like riding a bike with training wheels and they don't ever come off because we don't get to do it as often as we should to be confident in it. So I think, yes, practicing your presentation skills, talking about yourself, making an elevator pitch. And even if it is not something that you're going to say on your application or on your resume or in an interview, you could write down, the top 3 things about you, the top strengths, the top things that you bring to an organization, and paste that on your computer screen somewhere where you can see it and read it every day, because that's going to help reframe your mind and help your mindset. I have talked about this, I think, in a webinar last week. I started reading this book, and the title, of course, is escaping me, so that's terrible. But one of the things that it talks about in the book is waking up every day and saying something great is going to happen today. And at first, when I read it, I was like, "This is hokey. Like, I don't need to say this every day." But this was a month ago, and I have made a consistent effort of saying that every day. And wouldn't you know, I've been able to identify really good things that have happened more days than not, right? It's not going to be something great is going to happen. I'm going to get the job today, or I'm going to win the lottery today. It doesn't have to be this grand thing, but it really, truly has helped me reframe how I approach my day and what I'm going through. So even if you are, let's say you wake up and you say something great is going to happen to me today, and you sit down and you're going to apply to some jobs, and you always get frustrated or stuck on a certain step of a job application. Maybe it's the cover letter, maybe it's your profile summary, maybe it's finding the keywords that you need to include, and you go and you apply to this job, and it's like the keys and your fingers just type the right stuff, and it takes half the time that it normally does. That's a great thing. That's what I'm talking about when you have to celebrate the small things that happen, because it is all getting you in the direction of your eventual job that you will land as you go through this process. So The other thing is you could say, something great's going to happen to me. I'm going to be more confident in answering the question, tell me about myself, and I'm going to practice that. And those are things that anything that you can do to upskill in an area that maybe you aren't as confident, yes, is going to be beneficial. All right, as we're winding down, I think somebody had a question about the recording. We are sending this recording to you within the next few days to the email address that you registered with. Here's an interesting question. And this will be the last one since we're at time right now. Since there are benefits to imposter syndrome, would there be any harm in being aware of it and recognizing its effects, good and bad, but not attempting to overcome it? I'm going to share this story about my daughter who just started college, and she rushed a sorority, and it was between two sororities at the end, and she had to pick, right? And people were telling her, you want to go where you're most comfortable. You want to, really observe what's going on at each of these houses and the people that are there and who do you mesh with and all of these things. Well, she said to me and her dad, like, I don't want to go where I'm most comfortable. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to join this one sorority, and they want me, and the interactions I've had there have been good. I feel like I could find my place there. The other place is very comfortable. I know people that are there, but I want to go to the place that stretches me. And to your point here, recognizing the benefits to being outside of your comfort zone, actually walking into it, right? And seeing what happens. I think, growth really only comes when we step outside of our comfort zone. I think that's true. Personally, I was proud of my daughter for saying that and feeling that at 18. She definitely is very braver than me in this instance. But I think knowing your limits, right? And where you are getting stuck or where you might get stuck or where you might feel like, oh, I cannot do this anymore. And figuring a way to just break through that emotion, what you find on the other side, um, could be a really good thing. And, getting through something eventually, because I do think not attempting to overcome it, I think eventually you do when you do something challenging and when you embrace those feelings that you are having. So I think that's all really good. I think that there are a lot of opportunities that can come from understanding when we're uncomfortable and things that we can do moving forward. So hopefully this was helpful today. I know we got through most of the questions, but not all of them. Please look for the recording. Thank you for supporting each other. And sharing some of your experiences, because I think that it's helpful to know we are not alone. And we will be back tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow at the webinar. So hopefully some of you will be in Big Marker too. Everybody have a good afternoon, and we will see you later. Bye.